Hi, everybody. My name is Derek Mazzoni. Welcome to Sama, Seattle Circuit Music and Art, a weekly stream of artists, interviews from all over the world who focus on presenting or creating music that has a transcendent quality. Obviously, a lot of people have an opinion about what transcendent means and what music means. We are curating a series of musical expressions and artistic expressions that allow different cultures to present their work, their identity to a larger population, and that music allows that culture to be understood in a way that transcends language, that transcends temporal and spatial limitations. And this particular band fits that quite nicely. They are known as the Barmer Boys, and they are simply an Indian musical group, but they're so much more than that. They belong to the Manganiyar Sufi Muslim community, one of many communities throughout Rajasthan, Pakistan, and northern India. And the Barmer Boys blend traditional Sufi and gypsy folk music. Their repertoire encompasses many musical traditions from religious and spiritual communities of the Northwest Indian subcontinent region. We're going to be talking to the co-founder of their record label, Amaras Records, and a co-producer of the Barmer Boys, Ankur Malhotra, who's a friend of mine. We've had him on before with Laka Khan. Great man and very knowledgeable and quite the DJ too. We'll learn more about that in just a little bit. Just a quick bit of info. The Barmer Boys are, the members are Amanga, Rais Khan, and Raza Khan from Rajasthan. And their songbook reflects the influences of Bhakti Sufi movement of the 15th century. It takes the form of popular Kabir and Mira Bhajans, as well as Sufi kalams. This is evident in tracks such as Varyun, Ranji, and Pir Jilani. They include songs that are typically performed at weddings and births in local villages and communities. The band has been incorporating electronic elements, beatboxing, which sounds ridiculously awesome, and DJ culture. We're going to be hearing also 6 tracks recorded on the outskirts of Delhi. This was happening during COVID lockdown, so Ankur informed me that finding a quiet place to record in India is an easier task conceptually than in practice, but we succeeded, and I'm grateful for that. So right now, I'd like to introduce you to Ankur Malhotra. Ankur, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Derek. Pleasure to be back on Sama and to be presenting Barmer Boys. And one of the things I wanted to mention up front is the band has been evolving. It's been around 11 years. Mm-hmm. And so the artists who currently form the band are Manga, the lead vocalist, as you mentioned. It's Sawai Khan, who plays some of the other percussion instruments, okay, and Nagma Khan on the dholak. So
perfect.
But yes, Barmer Boys. So first of all, Barmer. The word Barmer is one of the largest districts, geographic districts in India, and it's on the extreme westernmost part of the country, mm-hmm, bordering Pakistan on one side, the region of Sindh in Pakistan, specifically Gujarat in the south, and it's close to the salt caravans, the ancient trade routes. So it's been at this crossroads of culture, of these different traditions, these different sounds, and when Ashutosh and I from Amaras were driving through the desert, trying to find some of these unique sounds and voices, we came across the voice of Manga, mm-hmm, the voice of Barmer Boys, in a tiny village, Ramsar, 40 miles from the border from Pakistan. And we've just finished recording a session with the late Rukma Bai, one of the very few Manganiyar female musicians. And halfway through that session, she calls out to this man walking down the street, "Mangya, bring your harmonium and accompany me." And at the end of that session, we're about to pack up, he pipes up and says, "I also sing, may I?" And we're like, "Sure."
Yeah.
And he does. And I still remember that day from December 2010. And I still have the same goosebumps, which was the effect his voice had on me and Ashutosh sitting across that courtyard. And when he started singing, that voice, and that voice needed to be heard, it had to be brought out. And that started this process of let's form a band around this voice, which is so raw and so real. It had really not performed outside his community.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of Barmer Boys.
Perfect. Great story. And that leads us to the first track. This is Nagma from the Barmer Boys, just recorded for Sama. And Nagma translates roughly a glimpse of a star. I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you like Sama. And as always, subscribe and share. We try to get this music and this culture out to as many people as possible. Barmer Boys on Sama.
Hello Sama, we are Barmer Boys.
And that was the Barmer Boys, recorded on the outskirts of Delhi, probably even further than Delhi. Ankur will let me know in just a little bit here. I'm with Ankur Malhotra, co-founder of Amaras Records and a co-producer of Barmer Boys. Ankur, you just share with us that you heard the band for the first time in 2010 on this journey to record musicians throughout Rajasthan. That's an amazing journey in and of itself. But once you discover these bands, you want to share them. It's not like, a piece of artwork that you just sits in your home. It's like, what's the point of that? What has been the process of presenting and getting this music out so that other people can have the goosebumps you spoke of?
So with case in point with Barmer Boys, for example, so this was just this one vocalist musician we had discovered at that point. Then we came across the other master percussionist who was playing, we heard the morchang, which is the jaws harp, the khomus, one of the oldest instruments known to humankind. And then there's the khartal, which are the castanets, which we'll hear later on. There's the bhapang, a single string plucked drum. And there's beatboxing. And then there's the percussion. And all these sounds together were somehow, and this is all celebratory music, so right, they're performing this music at weddings, at parties in their communities. So it's all uplifting music. And then if we start coupling some of these things together, and that was the idea, that this voice coupled with this percussive element could be great. It could get people dancing. Get people dancing on stages in cities, because you didn't really see this music in New Delhi, for example, the city I grew up in, or on stages in other parts of the world, because it was not getting there. And that started us thinking. We got the band, got the elements together, got the artists together, presented them at the Amaras Desert Music Festival, a platform we created in Delhi. And the first night we presented them as Manganiyar musicians from Rajasthan, which they are. But overnight, that night, we're kind of dissecting and wondering something was missing. And we started wondering, yes, we need to kind of give them an identity. And that started this process, and overnight coined the term Barmer Boys.
Why
a
that
reference to the space where they came from and to the sound that kind of incorporated, right? So they're all coming from Barmer, Jaisalmer, bordering districts in western Rajasthan, bringing in these unique elements of sound. And we were trying to think, okay, what's going to connect with people's minds? This is not traditional rural music. This is bringing in some of these modern elements which they've learned on their own. It wasn't a forced element. So the beatboxer basically traded morchang lessons with Jason Singh, a British beatboxer, and there was a cultural exchange happening. And so incorporating that into the sound and presenting that out became the role of Amaras and the role with Barmer Boys, and getting them onto platforms in India and then the rest of the world.
Perfect. I love that story. I love how the fact that it's a living music, it's a living culture. It's not trapped in time. Let's go to the other track right now. This is Vari Jaunre, I'm Blessed. Did I pronounce that right?
Vari Jaunre, and it's a Kabir Bhajan, and it's again a devotional spiritual song, but
Perfect.
Non-denominational.
Perfect. Barmer Boys on Sama. Something in my throat. Okay. Let us now. I don't know what the hell that's coming from. Okay. So we will now have seen Bari Juanre. I'm Blessed. And now just want to preference you for a little bit. We're going to talk a bit about the region, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Manganiyar Sufi Muslim community like we talked about with Lakakat. It's like I want to go a little deeper into like where are they from? What is this thing? Because we're living in a urban world in many ways, and so these artists are representing a really ancient culture, a really interesting culture, and would love to share that with the audience.
Next song, Wari Jaun Bal Hari Jaun, Satguru Anganaya mein Wari Jaun.
Barmer Boys on Sama, Saddle Circuit Music and Art. Beautiful work from an ancient culture. In some ways, a different way to look at the world, and it's super important to be able to share that, so that culture, that language, that perspective can enhance our lives. They are part of the Manganiyar Sufi Muslim community, like another artist we had on a while ago, Laka Khan, that Ankur was able to bring here. I'm familiar a little bit about that community. They are a community of performers, musicians. More than that, obviously, but that is the tradition that they're carrying on. And they were hired or supported by the nobility around the region, that then they would perform at festivals, perform at homes. That was a life that went on for hundreds of years. Uncle, can you go a little deeper into that community and more importantly, like, where is that community now? Because I know with Laka Khan, he's one of the last players of his instrument. What is happening, and what are, if any, plans to preserve it, to incorporate it into so that more people can have this experience?
So, as you pointed out, the Manganiyars, also known as the Magnahars or the Merasi in Pakistan, are one of the very few communities found around the world whose sole purpose has been to perform music. And of course, they do other things too, but 400 plus years of a musical tradition, and they've been keepers of an oral tradition, keepers of the history of the region, the deeds that the wealthy or the landowners did, or events that happened around in their region, and so all this history has been passed on generationally, and here we are in the 21st century, rapid change happening. Yeah. There's urbanization, all sorts of erosion of values of what constitutes daily practice, for example, or what makes a household of musicians and persist through generations. And this was something that we also started noticing in our travels. Is like, how do we keep this sustainable in this day and age? And I think that was one of the other reasonings behind getting Barmer Boys onto stage, onto platforms, was that this is folk music. It is music in constant evolution. It's constantly changing, constantly incorporating new ideas and new thoughts. And it is not about trying to preserve something in the past. It is about how do we take the past into the future. And this became kind of a great experiment in that sense of how could we perhaps repurpose some of these traditional songs and introduce these to a wider audience if we take them out of the box or the construct of this is traditional music or rural music. And when we talk about, or when we mention the word or the band name Barmer Boys on radio or in a general conversation, people don't come to it with that preconceived box, right? Barmer Boys. It sets up a modern construct, if I may say that. And that was kind of very intentional. And we're seeing that happen. I think part of it is to create opportunity, to create platforms that give respect, but also revenue, money. And that's what's going to keep the cycle going. Why would the grandson or the grandkids be interested in learning? Yeah. They would be if they could see that, they could support their families.
Got it. So it's like the Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan model, where it's like it becomes, a family, a legacy. And, this is what you do. And the only way that it becomes a legacy is if you can actually support yourself.
And with the case of Barmer Boys, it's also interesting. For example, I mentioned Sawai Khan. So he's the youngest member in the band, all of 24 years old right now. And the band, the members have changed over time. Manga, the voice has been the constant. But Sawai is such a beautiful story too. So this is a kid who was 12 years old when he started listening to Barmer Boys on YouTube. And he learned a lot of the music, he learned how to beatbox listening to the music of Barmer Boys, and come 2021, he's here for auditions. We're doing auditions in the desert, and this magic happens, right? And here he is now, a member of Barmer Boys, bringing that emotion and that joy of youth, of being a Barmer boy, into the band.
Perfect. I love that. Okay, let's get to another song right now. This is Barmer Boys. This is a track called Doro, which translates as the thread that binds on Sama, Seattle Circuit Music and Art. Hope you like it.
Next song, Doro, wedding song.
Barmer Boys with a track called Dora, recorded on the outskirts of Delhi in India just a little while ago. I'm here with Ankur Malhotra, co-founder of Amaras Records, who releases music from North India and Rajasthan, and co-producer of the Barmer Boys. So, Ankur, we were planning on having the Barmer Boys a little while ago, just as COVID was kicking in, and it was a scary time. There was people got COVID. We didn't have all the information we have right now. Obviously, we were talking a little while ago about artists being able to survive, and people aren't buying records, CDs so much anymore. So touring, especially festivals and such, is really the model that brings in enough funding to keep the project going. Now, inshallah, looks like we're having maybe an opportunity for more concerts, festivals per se. Any insight you can give us of maybe the Barmer Boys being available, playing somewhere? We're all over the world now. So are there any plans, future plans, or people on hiatus? What's the scoot?
Lots of plans cooking up, and we have some major announcements to make, and I wish I could mention some of the big festivals that we will be performing at this year.
Awesome.
So we're really excited to be actually getting back on the road, and we will be working on a new recording as well with the band, and planning on, again, touring. As we know, is a labor of love. There's a lot of heartache involved as well, especially in these days. And so we're working on 2023 with plans for a full-fledged tour. And right now we're playing catch up with all the shows that we were supposed to have been doing in the years, our dead years.
Got
so
it.
to speak.
Well, hopefully nobody passed.
Yes,
and,
inshallah.
and then, but this is a live performance. This gets people moving, gets them excited, gets them to experience a culture and a language and a way of life in a way that sticks with them. For this, this is broad, but we don't know much about the music of Rajasthan. We don't know much about the music of India, and we don't know much about the music of Pakistan. And when they think of Bhangra or Bollywood, because obviously those are like huge cultural manifestations of that, and through that maybe you'll hear some Qawwali music and other things like that through that filter. But these are some of the most ancient cultures on the planet, and the music and art that had come from those cultures is legion. And it's like we're just scratching the surface of the things that are going on there. You took this journey to try to find this because you heard and saw something that you felt like, this is amazing. I'm putting words in your mouth, obviously, but this is amazing. This needs to be shared because, partly, things are changing. We're becoming urbanized, so some of these musical traditions are in danger of fading. But just the inherent beauty of this type of creativity is wondrous, and it's so important to present it, to share it out there. Can you highlight any other things? It's like, are there other? You were just talking about various communities that are there. Are there other musical communities? Are there other things that we should be on the lookout for? Should we be digging in? Because once you start, you're like, okay, this is a journey into a whole other place. What are some of the things that you could share?
It is a rabbit hole, and sometimes you just feel like Alice in Wonderland, and there's magical things happening, but also very sad and things that you see. And I think part of that process has been, and yes, it's the Manganiyars, Mirasi are just one of the communities, right? But within this community, there are so many styles, so many different instruments. Laka Khan, we've had, master of the Sindhi Sarangi, and now awarded the Padma Shri, India's one of the highest civilian awards for the arts.
Congratulations.
And we've worked with the late Padma Shri also, Sakir Khan, who was a kamaicha maestro, an instrument that actually came to India from Azerbaijan, from Central Asia. So again, one of the last few communities, or not even communities, last few players existing for that instrument within the community in India. So that's a constant. I mentioned the morchang, for example, and that's what it looks like, right? So, and so we work with the instrument makers now. So these are
Beautiful.
hand forged, handcrafted instruments, and you start realizing that the art of instrument making is also disappearing. And that is equally what that is needed for the music to persist. So working on these different angles. So when you're looking at these musicians, or when you're listening to some of this fabulous music, not just from Rajasthan, but also from various parts of the world, also try and think and connect to some of the instruments, and not just the instruments, the fabric. So this is an ajrak, a very traditional pattern from Rajasthan. It's handmade or block printing. Those are also traditions that are fading, right? And that's the idea: is how do we incorporate these different ideas, these different folk traditions, to keep them alive. Another example I'd like to point out to is the Barmer Boys album. For example, we made some handmade albums on vinyl, and it's called Kesaria Bam, but that's what the cover looks like.
That's awesome.
And that's the style of hand painting in India. So a lot of
Yeah.
the shops and everything is painted by hand. But today, unfortunately, it's all going to digitization. So you have the same Arial font going everywhere, and nothing against Arial font. But the idea being, how do we keep these traditions alive and keep them vibrant and inject these are vibrant to begin with, but how do we instill a 21st century sensibility to these, so they are considered hip, perhaps?
Yeah,
in
no, but
our
that's a good one. So they're like they can be adopted, because I'm familiar. It's not just India. They're in various all over East Africa and West Africa. There were artisans that created your barbershop. These are the haircuts. We're going to hand paint all of them. So it's wonderful that you're actually going deeper, not just like here's the band, but actually the instrument maker and the artisans around that. It could make a really powerful tour in and of itself. Ideas. Let's go into it right now. This is a beautiful track called Amrano. People are good from the town of Amrano, and the Barmer Boys incorporate this song into whatever town they might be in. So as Ankur was telling me, if they're playing in Prague, the people of Prague are good. If they're playing in Seattle, the people of Seattle are good. So let's enjoy this right now. Barmer Boys, recorded just recently on the outskirts of Delhi on Sama, Seattle Circuit Music and Art.
Next song, Amarano. Beautiful city, beautiful people from Amarkot, Pakistan.
That was Amrano from the Barmer Boys. Thank you for joining me here. I'm Derek Mazzoni. This is Sama, Sales Circuit Music and Art. I'm here with Ankur Malhotra, if you're just tuning in right now. I work in radio, that's why I say tuning in. But if you're watching right now. So, Pakistan, India, Northern India, incredibly complex, ancient cultures, Ankur. But people in the West are fed a whole bunch of propaganda about them, where the subtlety, the beauty, the nuance of those cultures just get lost, utterly lost. I've had experiences like this personally. The first time I've been to, like China as an example, Western China, the things that I was told about that part of China, and the things that people in that part of China were told about people where I came from, were just laughable, utterly laughable. And we're getting that right now from Pakistan, specifically in northern India. Music is an opener. Music and culture and art transcends, short circuits propaganda. This might not be your intention. It is my intention with what I'm trying to do with Sama in general, and with the stuff I'm doing at KXP. But I'm curious, has that come across your mindset when you're presenting this stuff? Because, we just don't get much music. Pakistan is a gigantic country. It's a huge population. And India even more so, but we don't get much. I mean, financing is one thing, but it's also, it feels like we're missing something, something that is so important for us all. You're seeing small islands, and beautiful. This isn't a judgment, like Cuba, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, Trinidad. They're creating all of this vibrant art and music, and that's just one small place. If you were to look at some place like Rajasthan or Pakistan, that's like a continent of stuff, and we just don't know. We just don't know so much about that. So I'm curious. Share with me, what's the thing?
You're touching on so many points that
I do that. I'm sorry.
But all of them are so valid because those were kind of our frustrations growing up. I grew up in Delhi in India, and a lot of those, what I call cultural homogenization, right? And it happens even within our communities, right? So within India, growing up in India, you would always stereotype and homogenize everyone from South India. But South India, what do we mean by that? 17 languages, cultures, each one with its own musical tradition.
Yeah.
And so we start applying those. And so this is also learning, I think as we grow older, hopefully we've also, we become wiser a little bit. So applying some of that and seeing what can change. Those frustrations didn't change. So Ashutosh and I would be chatting about the same old, right? The Bollywood, the Bhangra, but we're surrounded by all this. And what about this? And why can't we access it? And so it also requires, I guess, a little bit of madness, a little bit of craziness for us to just get on the road and, you know what, we're going to do it, try and get it out. We may or may not, we didn't know what we were doing when we started.
Yeah, it's not like, you can go to a bank and go
And
like,
yeah,
I know
even
I have a
now,
huge audience.
It's always a learning work in progress, right? So how do I get this music out there? What are the platforms? And today, should I be getting Barmer Boys on NFT or perhaps not? I rather get them to
You don't
get
know.
the music out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but it's like the proliferation of technology is global. There are more people with cell phones than there are people without cell phones. And that's not the case for telephones. There were far less people without telephones than with telephones. And so you're seeing this advancement. I mean, I call it advancement, that's a loaded term, but just people adopt these technologies really quickly. Like I work with musicians and artists from, indigenous communities all over the world. Their parents didn't have phones. Their parents didn't have TVs. They now have access to the internet. They know what NFTs are, and they know how to use social media. They didn't go the pattern. They didn't follow the same track that people in the West did, but they now do. They know how to, make Instagram videos. They know how to make TikTok videos, wherever they are. And so that is a complete shift, and this is an interesting opportunity to bring their culture and their art into this universe that their parents didn't have a chance to because there were too many gatekeepers.
It's also, so again, I think part of it is to create these opportunities, these pathways, right, to ecosystems that exist within the world. How can we connect Rajasthani music, Manganiyar music, music of Barmer Boys into the platforms where we consume this music?
Yeah.
How do we get them on Spotify? Lakha Khan cannot do it himself.
No.
Per se. And the recordings have to be done in a way that give justice, right, to the music and exist in the similar ecosystem, right? So those have been some of the activities which we take upon ourselves in a sense and firmly believe in. We are kind of audiophiles, and it's important to communicate.
It's gotta sound good.
The goosebumps of the sound, right?
Yeah.
And but there's also, like, coming back to the whole technology, the pros and cons. As we've spoken about the pros, the slippery slope is, I see this with the younger generation. The time they would have spent learning this instrument, honing that skill, is not being spent anymore, right? And I use the Lakha Khan as an example because he's a master with 500 odd songs in his head, and it's a library that's going to disappear if it's not learned. It's not
learned
down.
and passed on. It's true. It's true. There is, we have hope, and in the work that I've been doing now for 30 years, within these musical traditions and cultures, what we're finding is that a generation kind of like takes on hip hop and or trap now or something like that. and as they should for a while, and then they go like, that really isn't me. That I need to find something that speaks to my own roots, my own traditions, and we're finding a bit, but it could be growing, is that they're incorporating their own traditional instrumentation. They're incorporating their own stories because they find that their emulation or mimicry of another culture is hollow. It really doesn't feel that spiritual, that there's probably another word for it than spiritual, that like something within them. It doesn't feed their soul and their heart in a way. And I'm hopeful, and especially with the kind of work that you're doing, because often, it's not like they're living in the same villages. So if you're a kid from this region and you find somebody like Barmer Boys, or you find somebody like Kaka Khan, that's the transition. Then you suddenly want to do that. You want to play that kind of music. You want to learn about these instruments. And it's super important that Amaras and you, Ankur, are doing this work, because that is allowing people like me that don't know much about Rajasthan and people that live in Rajasthan to discover this music, to not even discover, to have this music revealed to them, and then incorporate that. So let's go into another track from the Barmer Boys. This is a really interesting piece. It's called Jiro. It's an agricultural song about crops. It's a folk song, and Jiro is the name of the cumin seed. So this is an interesting track because it speaks to the reality of living in a village. You got to get food, and you create songs about that food, because if you don't have it, obviously what's going to happen. But it's also a really interesting traditional piece that becomes it's of the earth, and it's a beautiful piece. Barmer Boys on Sama, Seattle Circuit Music and Art.
Next song, Jiro. Q mean song. Q mean song. Jiro.
Jiro, Jiro, Jiro.
And that was Jiro from the Barmer Boys, recorded outside of Delhi. I'm here with Ankur Malhotra, co-founder of Amaras Records and a co-producer of the Barmer Boys. We've been talking about a lot of things with this music and this art because, you know, it's not a rock band per se. I interview an insane amount of rock bands all the time and all types of musical bands. And it's great. Everybody's got an interesting story. You're playing your guitar and your drums and your bass and you're singing songs of love and it's everything. It's beautiful. We all love it. But when you're dealing with music like this, that has this kind of legacy, this kind of urgency to it, where it's so important for it to kind of find a place in the gigantic lexicon of music that's out there. Ankur and I both are DJs and fans of records. And we also kind of grew up at a time where if you wanted to find records, you had to find a cool radio station. And if you wanted to buy it, you had to go to a thing called a record store. And a record store had a limited amount of inventory and real estate to actually put stuff in. This is the history of world music and all that. So, you have this behemoth, which is Western music, Northern Hemispheric music, culture, that dominates that. You haven't, there was a time when like an artist would release a new record, it would dominate the shelf space of those record stores because they would want to sell that record to as many people as possible. And so, I, who worked at a record store, would find this interesting stuff. It would be in these tiny little sections in the back called Other or Oriental, or, whatever attempt it was. And I'm not mad at the people that were putting it together. I was one of those people. It's like, this is really interesting. I have no idea what it is or where this thing could possibly go. Now you don't have record store. You still have them, but you don't have them as much. You have streaming services. And those are record stores that would be the size of, they would be, beyond size. They'd be the size of the Pentagon. It would be the size of whole cities if you were to fill them with vinyl or with CDs or cassettes or whatever you would put in there. It's digital. It doesn't have any tactile aspect to it. But you're still dealing with the same situation. These artists are available, but how do you bubble them up so that when an Adele or even in our space, like let's say a new wave comes in of Cuban music or Brazilian music, or a huge, Punjabi MC turns a whole generation onto a Bhangra. All of these subtle things just get pushed away, pushed. It's hard to find. I wouldn't say pushed away. It's hard for them to bubble up. So A, I applaud you. There was a bit of a lecture. I'm sorry, but B, I kind of want to just like set the stage here right now. It's like people can find stuff, and yes, you can find like a con on Bandcamp and anything like that. But there's so much stuff out there. There's so much shit. It's crazy. What do you do, Ankur, to make sure that your person, your culture, your work shows up?
Yeah, it's raise that flag up high and wave it frantically. I think that's something that all of us in the labels in on radio, we're doing that, and that's important more so for these artists. It's getting them onto platforms that matter, right? Laka Khan, Womack Showcase artist, Barmer Boys. Was important for us to get them onto MTV Coke Studio, one of the platforms for this kind of folk crossover kind of music from Pakistan, from India. And they were on season 3 MTV Coke Studio, getting them out there. Their songs, like one of their songs, Bole To Mitho Lage, has spawned a whole bunch of versions of that. It's got 7 million plus views on YouTube. So getting them to be the stars, doing the branding, taking them onto some of the major festival platforms, right? Barmer Boys played Roskilde Festival, so imagine that's the Lollapalooza of Europe, or if I might use
Yeah, no,
the
it's huge.
equivalent. Something, and they're just rocking audiences because ultimately, as I said, right, it's the emotion, and if we can connect, it is celebratory music, and they sing about love, they sing about joy, and And again, it's how do we construct some of these songs. This last one we heard, Jiro, it's a traditional song about pestilence. It's about the crop getting disease. Uh, Not a fun subject, really,
No,
but
but
if
it's
we
a real thing.
reconstruct and present it, it's like a techno track, you know. For me, I just think of it as yeah, it's frantic, and because there is a franticness in the subject matter also, right? You know, be aware. So I think it's part of kind of connecting those emotions, the emotional aspect, which is the primal part of your brain, right? So
Yep.
what is the emotion? Then it transcends language, it transcends these boundaries. And then on platforms like Spotify or something, like the album artwork, the presentation, all
Yeah.
those things matter. The marketing matters, getting the voice out on radio stations. So yeah, so all of that.
Okay. Good, 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 good. It's good to hear. Because sometimes in these situations, when you're dealing with bands like this, they fall under the bucket of too authentic. I've heard often from festival heads and record labels,
You hear that
etc.
a lot.
It's like it's just too real, man. It's like this crowd just can't deal with that kind of real. And sometimes, you have in the States, you have like a festival like Bonnaroo would sometimes take some risks, and Sasquatch around here when it was going on. And there's new festivals coming too that will take a risk on that. You have promoters and producers who will like kind of know their crowd a bit, and there's maybe a level of trust there, and maybe they have enough backing because sometimes, we all know the economics of these things, and they're scary. I've had friends have to sell their houses because they had a bad year. It's a crazy person's gig, but if you can find a band and you can bring them to an audience, and that audience is ready for that, and I guess every audience is ready for that. It's just the kahunas of the promoter to put that out there. That audience can have a truly transcendent experience with that authentic music. And I'm glad you didn't say create a some type of version of this music that is palatable, digestible to the audience, because that happens a lot in these situations where an amazing artist is brought in and a bunch of producers go like, you see this in hip hop a lot, where it's like, no, we need to water you down a little bit so this audience can actually understand you and take you in, and then the essence of what made that artist amazing is completely gone, and they just become like everything else, and then it's even worse than if they just
We have a
came in.
term. We have a term for that, which I can't use on broadcast.
We're not
So, but
We're not broadcast, dude. We're not broadcast. You can't
yeah,
say
we call
anything.
it hit shit, you know. So,
Yeah. No, it's true. It's just like, oh, and you've seen it. You've seen artists, and I've seen artists that like have gone through it and then have come back and have actually like written in the New York Times. It's like, oh my God, I made such a horrible mistake, because it's so, it is heartbreaking. It really is. It's like, because you have a relationship with that artist. You know what I mean? And when that artist fails you like that, it's like, oh man, I thought you were this, and now you're that. It's just like, no.
Well, they kind of take you away from the music sometimes, right? So
Yeah.
you might be in love with an instrument, and then it's kind of a violation of
Yeah.
your trust, right? And
Yeah.
those have been things, those have been on kind of constant repeat. You see that all the time, right? Oh,
Yeah.
this artist, and now they're going to take this song, and it's going to be popularized because let's add some keyboards and
Yeah.
let's
The
add some,
synths, the 80s. It's
yeah.
like, why does this have to sell? And with amazing artists, like, we know, like Youssou N'Dour, and it was like, wow, what the hell happened to this guy? He had this amazing voice when it came out, and then suddenly the synth pads just started coming out.
My first concert was actually Amnesty International, 1987. Youssou N'Dour, along with Tracy Chapman and Sting and Bruce Springsteen, and but yeah, that was New Delhi in a huge stadium.
Wow, that's a big stadium. That was an interesting time, also.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Ankur, this is awesome. We're gonna close with a hit a song that many people in the space know is Mast Kalandar, which was made. You know the legacy of it. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan made it really popular. Really popular. But yeah, enough popular that people know it. The translates is Lost in His Divine Presence. But tell us the legacy, tell us the history of that track, if you would, Ankur.
So Mast Kalandar, Shahbaz Kalandar, it's goes back 800 plus years. So it's a Sufi spiritual song, and was penned by Amir Khusro, I believe, in the 14th century. And I'm mixing up my centuries now because
Okay.
and then I think it was in the late 18th century, Baba Bulle Shah, another famous Sufi poet composer, he revised the lyrics as they're known today, as Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan sang the song and got it out into the ears of the world. And it's one of those songs which has been done by hundreds and thousands of musicians from the Indian subcontinent, South Asia, but also by artists in the UK and in North America. It's had remixes come out, Michael Brook remixing or doing a version with Nusrat Talveen Singh. So many artists, and it's one of those songs which is also kind of one of those crossover songs which a kid in the city would know, a kid in the village would know. It was the one of the very, very few songs where it didn't matter whether you were rich or poor, whether you were educated or not, what your social or class structure was. You knew this song. And that's why it's, I think, something that we incorporate into our sets because of its universality. And I think that's the nature of this music. It's to celebrate, to everyone, to bring everyone together.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This is awesome. Barmer Boys, Mast Kalandar. Ankur, thank you. Massive success. Stay in touch. We love welcoming you here, inevitably. And also, continue doing the work and continue sharing these beautiful stories.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
This is Sama, Seattle Circuit Music and Art. You can find our weekly stream on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. We have a bunch of great videos on TikTok. Obviously, we have a bunch of great videos in what is now known as Meta. And so please subscribe, follow, share, so we can all present and share this beautiful music throughout the world on Sama, Seattle Circuit Music and Art. Be well. Peace.
Next song, Dhamadham Mast Kalandar, Baba Bulle Shah Kalam, Sufi song.
लाल मोरी पते